Hello and welcome back into another episode of Tobacco Road and Abroad. We're doing something a little different today. Like we said, we're going to bring college basketball into the mix, and we are. So this is our massive college basketball preview, super whatever you want to say, super episode. We don't know how
Breakdown.
long this is going to be, but it could be a while. So Aiden and I have talked. We think we're going to start with the ACC. So is there anything when it comes to the ACC? I mean, obviously we'll probably start with Carolina. So go. Why don't you go for it and just lead with your thoughts?
I'm expecting Carolina to have a big year this year. We have RJ Davis returning, and we also have some strong freshmen and like more newcomers, or not necessarily even like newcomers, just younger players that are getting into the rotation more. I'm expecting a big year out of RJ Davis, and Elliot Kadu has been proven to be a good asset so far. As playing in the guard, he's been averaging a good amount of assists and steals in the game, so I expect him to be a pivotal player come like near like the end of games where we really need to get big defensive stops and just movement on the offensive side. Just looking at the schedule for UNC, recently we dropped one to Kansas. And I wasn't as disappointed in this game as I originally thought I was going to be. UNC started off pretty slow, but was able to come back and was able to lead at times. But unfortunately, lost 92-89. That game, I would say, was a pretty good test on where UNC is right now. They're good enough and to be considered one of the top programs. But just considering the fact that they were away, it's early in the season, they were a little bit sluggish at the start. So I think there's a skeptical optimism at UNC. And just looking ahead of the rest of the schedule, UNC is going to be playing Alabama, Florida, and UCLA before they head into conference play. And I think these are going to be some pretty pivotal tests. I really want to see how the Alabama game goes, because that's going to be a revenge game, because last year they were kicked out of, I believe, the Elite Eight by Alabama, and that's definitely going to be one that a lot of UNC fans are going to want to see positive results on. But other than that, looking at the entirety of their conference play, I don't see a ACC team that they're going to play that they can't handle. The only problem I see in the future might be Duke, but Duke has been also showing that there might be having a little bit of early season struggles with their first loss to Kentucky so far. So I think this is going to be a pretty good year for Carolina, and I think they have what it takes to basically run the table and make a shot at first seed in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I agree. I will say the ACC does look strong this year. Duke. I will say Duke does look solid. They did look scary in the first half, but they just kind of collapsed in the end there. I know people are dogging on Cooper Flag on Instagram for his 2 turnovers in a row and then not boxing out there at the end, which I feel like that is his just kind of, I would say, immaturity. And I don't mean that as like a slight, but the dude's 17 years old. Like, people, you like this, he's a kid. You got to cut him some slack. And I know he's playing basketball at the highest level, but like at the end of the day, they still did lose. NC State perspective, they looked good their first 2 games. That Presbyterian game where we won by 9, I know a lot of people didn't watch that game and don't understand why the score that is that. Keats pulled the starters halfway through the second half. We were up 20, and he kind of let the backups in walk-ons play that game. And should they have let Presbyterian back in that game? Probably no. But I mean, it's the backups and the walk-ons, so it's like the starters have built a lead. We look good. I will say my main criticism of last year, I did say last year Keats doesn't make adjustments. So far, Keats has made adjustments. My criticism last year was that NC State scoring was not very spread out. It was very much centered around 3 players. And if Horn and Burns and sometimes Jaden Taylor, if the 3 of them were having a bad night, it was an ugly game. And essentially, that's kind of how NC State ended up in the position they were in last year. I know NC State was bottom of the ACC going into the tournament. Well, not the bottom, but bottom half. What made a difference was that 5-game stretch there at the end of the ACC regular season. NC State was actually in a really solid position before that 4 or 5-game slide. They were looking good, great conference record. Not just, I mean, they dropped some games they didn't want to drop. I mean, Carolina at home, losing by 1 possession, that obviously was hard. But then losing to Duke at home, and it's just that was kind of the slide where we lost 5 games in a row. But then the team kind of came together. Like I said, the scoring on this team's more spread out. There's a lot of exciting players. I mean, the one player I've been really excited about was Brandon Huntley Hatfield, Louisville transfer. I know that Louisville team last year was Louisville basketball is a fallen giant currently. Not the dog on them. Like Louisville's a basketball program I have a lot of respect for, just because it's like they've been through the ringer. I mean, they've been around, they've won championships, but not a lot's going from. But I will say Huntley Hatfield was the one bright spot from that team. He was their leading scorer, I believe. So far, Huntley Hatfield's averaged like about 12 points a game. He shoots 83% from the field, so good start. And like I said, the defenses look good. Just they look like a well-rounded team. I will say we don't look quite as explosive as we did last season, so kind of the streaky factor is not quite. That doesn't mean it's not there, but I don't think the streaky factor is as apparent this year. But I think the biggest thing about NC State last year was that team was streaky as hell. Like when they were on, they were on. Like when they were on, they could hang with anyone. But when they were off, they were awful. And essentially, that's what brought the run to an end. Is just the shots were not falling in that Purdue game. And hey, that's college basketball. That's gonna happen. Like that's kind of like the beauty of the sport is like college basketball. You can lose just because some terrible team decided that their shots were gonna fall that night. You could play that team perfectly. It's just basketball is similar to football. Like they say, there's no defense for the perfect pass. I say for college basketball, there's no defense for the perfect shot. If they're just firing on all cylinders and shots are just falling, like there's nothing you can really do. I mean, and I guess that's the brutality of the sport, but that's also kind of the beauty of it. But in terms of NC State's season, I do think this will be a tournament team. Do I think we'll win the ACC again this year? I would hope so. Do I think we will? Probably not. And I don't say this. I say this in terms of a probability thing, not in terms of like an actuality. I do realize someone has to win the ACC tournament, but even for like the better teams, I don't think people realize how unlikely it is to win 5 games in 5 days, which is why my prediction for the ACC champion is going to be the regular season and not the crapshoot that is the ACC tournament. Like, do I think the winner is going to be from the Big Four? No. Like, I don't think State Duke, like, and that's not, those teams have the firepower to win it, but there's now 17 teams in that fucking, I think it might even be 6 days now. Is it 6 days now? Now that we have 17?
Let's see.
Because if it's 6 days, I don't know who the fuck's winning that. Like, that's just detrimental to the ACC at that point. Like, you're asking, like you're asking for trouble there. If it's now 6 days, and then we've got conferences like the Big East where it's 3.5 to 4 days maximum. And even that's considered sacrilege to some of the old heads. Let me look.
Hang on 1 second. Fact checking.
It's got to be at least 5, I will say.
Yeah.
It's at least 5.
Yeah. I think it might be 6 now. I think it might be.
Jesus Christ, that's fucking grueling.
Yeah, but that's if you're on the lower end of the spectrum of the conference. But honestly, like this is going to be a very weird episode for me because right now I just feel like there's not like I don't have the basketball knowledge and also the foresight to really know which teams are going to pop and which teams aren't going to pop. This is going to be a very interesting year in college basketball, and I'm waiting to really make solid predictions in all of my conference assessments. But the ACC is just an absolute crapshoot, and the only real known teams that I can like truly make an assessment on are like UNC and Duke, and those are like the two teams that I just think have the best chance of being the like first overall seed or the number one team going into the tournament. And even then, like teams like I think Virginia might have there's too many unknown variables with Virginia with their head coach dropping out. I don't know how they're going to respond to that. Uh, I think Clemson always makes a good case about in the middle of the season where they start laying shots and start making like a case for being in the higher end of the ACC bracket. That's interesting. Miami, I feel it's like, is always slept on when it comes to looking at this conference. And even like some of the newcomers, I'm excited to see SMU basketball. That's something that I haven't really had time to dive into as much as before. Uh, I would say I think the newcomers of Stanford and Cal might not be able to keep up with ACC, especially with like their traveling. I don't see them being on the top end of the conference, and actually see them probably being to like the bottom of the ACC this year. But I could be wrong in that case. I think maybe Notre Dame might have a case for being a comeback team this year. I could see a world where they might actually kind of get their team together. But then yet again, it's just too many unknown variables. I can't make a real assessment, but I'm just rocking with UNC, and I think they have what it takes to, and they have the players and the experience in RJ Davis. And I think Davis might be able to make a case for a Wooden Award. He could be overall the college basketball MVP, and that's what I'm looking forward to as a UNC fan. But other than that, there's just so much unknown factors that are going into this that is going to be like tough to make an accurate assessment.
Yeah, I will say I'm going to give myself a rule. I'm not letting myself pick NC State after last year. I'm going to go logical, and this may be kind of off rock, like just kind of off my rocker bad. And I've seen some people give this team some love, and I think this may cause people to scratch some heads. But I'm just going to read off some stats from this team in the ACC. This team has not made a tournament in this coach's first 2 years. They made 2 NITs. They're returning 3 of their starting 5. And they're returning most of their top scorers. And a lot of people thought this team was an NCAA tournament snub last year. So if you haven't guessed it, it's Wake Forest with Hunter Salas. I mean, obviously like Duke and Carolina, but obviously they're always going to be contenders. But I feel like this could be Wake's year to either win. Like the time is now for Wake Forest. Like there's no time like the present now for them. This is their year. People thought last year was their year, but what a lot of people don't realize is people like to talk, like when it comes to Cinderella's last year, people love to talk about NC State, but there were a lot of other teams that won their conference that had no business winning that conference. Oregon's one of them. Oregon was another one of those spoilers where it was like they took an at-large spot. The committee came out and said that NC State and Oregon were essentially bid stealers. I don't like to use that term because I don't think the bid was necessarily stolen. If you win your conference tournament, I believe that holds a lot of weight. Like
Absolutely.
that does. I feel like that can, like they always say, not even winning it, but like a good performance in your conference tournament shows you can win against people in your conference in the crunch time when it really matters. And like
Sometimes
ACC,
the
I think,
final exam weighs more for a reason, like throw
yeah,
everything out. If you're able to get that passing grade by just going absolutely 100 on it, you deserve to pass. Like that's just how it is. But I think Wake Forest definitely needs to, because in recent years, and I feel like just Wake Forest has always kind of had almost like the little brother effect when it comes to like the Four Corners rivalry. Like, yeah, at the top, it's like UNC and Duke. Those are like the big household like brand names that like all across the nation people watch. NC State's usually the spoiler to both of them, but then behind them is Wake Forest, and Wake Forest fans and the Wake Forest culture surrounding the school really wants to make the case that Wake Forest is able to hang with the big boys, and I think they have the capacities and the capabilities to, and I expect a good year out of them. They have, like you said, three returning starters, and I think Hunter Salas is probably going to be having a big year. He's averaging 14 points a game so far. I think he's going to be able to put those numbers up. And the start of the season has been pretty good for them so far. Had a close one against Michigan, but going through games before their like conference play, they got some easy games against like Xavier. I think Xavier might be a little bit of a test, but I think they have the capabilities to get it out. They have Western Carolina, Detroit Mercy, who we will be elaborating on a little
later.
bit later. And then after that, it's going to be hard with two SEC games, Florida, and then at Texas A&M. I think they could have the capability to take on Texas A&M. There's some factors of that at Texas A&M team that I'm not necessarily too high on right now. They have JMU, that's another solid team. And then once conference play starts for them, I think if they're able to get past teams like Clemson and Syracuse, they're going to be able to make a good case for keeping games like State, UNC, and Duke close. And I see them sweeping teams like Stanford and in their series with them. And that's just my assessment of Wake Forest. But then, yeah, again, they could fall short of expectations. But I think they're going to have a very solid year this year, and I'm excited to see how it plays out for them.
Yeah, and with that being said, I will go back to my NC State point. I do think they will finish a lot higher than they did in the ACC last year. I do know the experts have them finishing lower than they finished last year, which I know we're not returning as many scorers as we did, but I feel like if you do the math, like in terms of the scoring, it's just more spread out. It's not as concentrated on Burns and DJ Horn. Like with this new lineup, we don't need Burns and Horn dropping 34 a game each. Like that's just not necessary. But like you said, I feel like this ACC is wide open for anyone, except for maybe the newcomers outside of SMU. I think this could be a big year for the Four Corners, and I feel like we need I also just feel like college basketball is better when the Four Corners are all like not even just ranked, but like relevant, if you know what I mean. Like tournament teams, like it's just better when they all four make the tournament. It's like, and I'm saying this because I saw something on Twitter the other day where someone took a screenshot of Connecticut, New York, and Rhode Island and said college basketball just means more here. And even though I went to Providence and I'd say a fan of Providence, not really. Like I attended Providence, but the college basketball culture at Providence compared to what I grew up with, like watching NC State, I will say NC State's is probably better just because it's like when you think of college basketball, you think of the state of North Carolina. Like I think North Carolina, I will fact check this. I think California is the only other state with more college basketball national titles, and they all come from one school in California.
Yeah.
That school sucks now at basketball, but UCLA's god awful at basketball now. But if you take in recency as well, North Carolina as a state has the most, I think, Final Fours and national championships. Like, sorry, that tweet just pissed me off. I'm like, what do you mean? North Carolina is the college basketball state. And I will say, Carolina Barstool, NC State Barstool, and Duke Barstool all collectively posted not a picture of North Carolina, but a picture of the triangle in response going, I'll do you one better. College basketball means more in these 3 cities than it does in that entire area.
Yep. Damn right. Damn right.
And moving on from there, like you said, ACC, I think, is a crapshoot. I will say the ACC slander is always there. I just think it's trendy to hate on ACC basketball. I don't know about you, but I just think that generates clicks. I mean, we are the college basketball conference. Like,
hate us because they ain't us.
Yeah, I mean, look at last year. They said we were off. Like, we had what, 4 of the Elite 8 teams last year? I think it was 3 or 4 of the Elite 8 teams last year.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I know UConn went, and props to UConn. Like that Dan Hurley is an amazing program over there, as much as I fucking hate UConn. But like you said, they hate us because they ain't us. Like,
hate us because they ain't us.
UConn's trying to get into a Power 5 conference. And I think with the amount of UConn fans talking shit, I think we say,
get them in. Get them in.
Get them in. What do you say?
Get on the line, boy. Let's go. That's right.
Oh, you and I had a different conclusion though. You're saying get on the line and prove it.
Yeah, no. We need to bring them in for football. We need to bring them in for football. We need them in for basketball. Get on the line.
Get on the line, bro.
Get on the tip off. Let's see how they do. Playing up against not a UNC and Duke every week, but playing a UNC and Duke, and then after that needing to go to a Miami, or after that going over to a Georgia Tech. I want to see that, because that's where they get you in the ACC. Like, it's not is you're playing high quality opponents every single, like, almost twice a week, and sometimes 3 times a week, and it's these teams that sometimes fly under the radar. I'm talking about maybe the Pitts of the world. I'm talking sometimes we got some FSU Clemson action going on. I'm saying like I'm a little bit biased in this part, but Notre Dame sometimes has a little bit of something to say when they try to make their case for being in the ACC. They've kind of fallen off in recent years, and like they've been kind of up and down a little bit, but playing an ACC schedule, like, it just means more.
And like you said, it's a brutal schedule. I mean, I think not in the recent ACC, but in the ACC, you used to have to play everyone twice.
Yeah.
Even in the 15-team ACC, I think you played everyone twice. And I agree with your point. It's not the Carolina game you have at home on noon where you can get everyone out there. It's that Tuesday or Wednesday night you're in fucking Atlanta. Georgia Tech hasn't won a conference game. No one's in attendance, but they just won it more that night. You're tired. You just got beat up on by either the Four Corners or like Miami. But then you got to go, like you said, it's always you're right. It's always Georgia Tech. It's always Georgia Tech on some fucking rainy ass night in late January or early February. But it's always those I don't even want to call them mid, because I feel like mid ACC teams could hang in 90% of conferences. They wouldn't win, but I get Georgia Tech I think they'd be a tournament. You put them in the Big Ten, they could be a tournament team. And they could be a tournament team in the Big Ten. But like I said, it's always like the Syracuse's. You go to like Syracuse, you can beat at home, but you go to the Carrier Dome on a Wednesday, 9 p.m. on a Wednesday night in February, you may not come out alive. You're not coming out alive.
Yep.
But no, like we said, you know what? Fuck it. We'll take the Big East teams. I mean, we already are a fucking graveyard for them. I mean, look at Syracuse, Miami, Georgia Tech, Pitt, Louisville, Miami. I mean, we are the current ACC is literally like the
The
people that
ghost of
freaked
Big
out.
East past.
The ghost of Big East passed, and not even the good Big East teams. But no. Moving on, should we move on to our other conferences? I know for some of the bigger conferences, you and I are going to have some more in-depth analysis, but I just think I'll take one more prediction from you from the ACC. How many, and I know it's too close to call. We're literally calling this episode risky business. So,
Yeah.
because predicting college basketball is like the death of you. It will kill you.
Yeah. So how many
How many
ACC
bids?
teams do
How
I
many
think can
bids
make
do you
the?
think ACC is getting?
All right. So we got Duke. We got UNC. I'm gonna throw.
Remember,
Let's
there's one
see.
more extra at-large bid because the Pac-12 folded. There's
All
one
right.
more
All right.
at-large bid.
Throw Miami. I'm gonna throw Wake Forest. I'm not necessarily too high on State, but it's fine. I think you could probably throw State in there. 5. I'm gonna say, is 6 a good number? Do you think 6 might be?
I'd agree with 6, but because fuck the Mountain West, I say we go a step further. Give us fucking 7. Give us 7.
7.
Give us 7.
7 might be a little bit too far for me. I'm gonna say 6. I think 6 is very generous.
Well, I mean,
That's,
they let the mid-ass Mountain West take 6 last year. That's over half the Mountain West.
yeah, I mean, it
But I
just
do
depends. It
agree.
depends
6 is
how.
good.
I think I like 6. I like 6.
6 is a good safe. I feel like that's one that's not going to
Six,
ruffle any
six.
feathers.
I think 6. Who can make like when I choose 6, I choose a 6 that can make can get in and make a run. I'm
Yeah.
not like you could probably like say, oh, it's going to be more, but like I'm saying 6 teams I see right now that can get in, but then also run the table and make it to at least pass the round of 32.
Yeah, I will say my 6 is a little different than yours. I'm not very high on Virginia after losing their coach. I don't know how
I
that's going
was
to
like
affect them.
Virginia, like I like that's my like if scenario because if it's not Virginia, it's going to be another ACC team. Like I just have that like 6 spot in there.
Yeah, my 6 for like my safe 6. I think my 7th is probably so my safe 6 is the Four Corners, Clemson, Miami,
Hmm.
and then I'd say probably my 7th because fuck the Mountain West would be probably be Pitt maybe. Because
Hmm.
one after about 7, we're starting to get into dire straits. So honestly, Syracuse could. Adrian Autry, he had a decent season after Jim Boeheim's retirement, but Syracuse was just kind of they were good, but then they couldn't get it done when it mattered. Like they thought they had put the nail in the coffin in NC State season in the final game of the ACC tournament, and then they turn around and get blown out by NC State the next week. And that is the nature of college basketball. I will not say I will say in college basketball, sometimes you just get blown out. It just happens. It's not your night. And I'm not saying that's a reflection on Syracuse, but you know what? I'll give that 7th spot to Syracuse. You know what? I'll give that in my opinion, I'll give that 7th spot to Syracuse. All right.
Yeah.
I guess moving on, what conference do you need to go to first?
Do we want to go through down the entire list now, or do we want to just like in alphabetical order, or do we still want to hit on the big conferences before we go into the smaller
Let's hit
ones?
on the big conferences because I feel like some of these will have more nuance, like Big 12, Big East, Big 10, SEC. You and I will have probably more
Yeah.
nuance and some more points we
Big
make.
12, I'm excited to talk about. Let's bring it into the Big 12 right now. With conference expansion, we now have Arizona State and Arizona and a multitude of other teams in this new Big 12. And I highlight Arizona and Arizona State because these are like traditional basketball schools that have a strong basketball culture that's being brought into a conference on the level of the ACC when it comes to just raw talent. Um, Big 12 is looking as strong as ever with Kansas Jayhawks at number 1 right now. They got a win against UNC and are proven to be like probably one of the more unstoppable teams in college basketball. What are your takeaways right now of the Big 12 and like any predictions that you may have about the conference?
I definitely think it is one of the strongest conferences in college basketball now. I think the conversation for strongest conference right now will probably be boiled down to the ACC or the Big 12 right now. I think it's kind of an arms race between the two right now. I do
Mhm.
think the Big 12 is getting a little bit more of the publicity love, but like we
I,
said, it's trendy to hate on the ACC, so that doesn't surprise me.
I think the
But
Big 12 is more top heavy.
they are more top heavy. I agree because I do think the bottom of the ACC it gets a little hairy there. With some of
Yeah.
those teams, with Stanford and Cal, I think it gets a little hairy down there.
Hmm.
Maybe
Hmm.
even Boston, maybe even a Boston College. But hey, they made the NIT and beat Providence last year, so who knows?
Yes. Yes.
Um, but like you said, I do think they're more top heavy.
Hmm.
Teams I'm excited about, obviously, this one team they were returning a lot of starters. I'm excited to see how Iowa State's going to perform. They were the best defense in every sort of metric last year in terms of defensive efficiency, turnovers forced, points allowed. Like they were what you want, and like they were going to be the definition of defense wins championships. I forget what stage they went out at. Let me double check. Um, but they were a good team. I think their main downfall was they did not have the scoring upside potential that they could have had. But excuse me for a second. CAA bracket, the final bracket. Um. Oh, sorry. Yeah, no. Iowa State went out in the Elite Eight. They lost to Illinois by 3. Outside of their first game, they didn't score more than 70 points in that tournament. And I think when you're that, like, I mean, obviously, I love defensively minded teams in college basketball. It's just a fun way to play. Like, you build yourself up, like, you build your team on defense and then build up from there. And I think that's a good base. But it's kind of hard to account for nights when you have that good of a defense where teams are just on fire. Now, granted, those are few and far between, but I think, they've got a reloaded roster. They've brought in some transfers. There's going to be a little bit more offensive firepower there. I'm excited about that. Now, I will say, I mean, obviously, the Kansas is kind of, I don't know if I'm going to pick Kansas to win, but I do think Kansas will be a close second. Now with Hunter Dickinson, I've been watching some of Kansas's tape lately, and just they run themselves very similar to UConn. It's people described it like, I know in football you talk a lot about pro style offenses, but in basketball, some of the examples of like will be a complex pro style offense. Obviously, the one that comes to mind that a lot of people talk about is UConn, obviously being back-to-back national championships. But another very complex offense is Kansas. Now, complex in the terms of they don't have many plays, but in terms of what concepts they run, there was one particular breakdown I saw where they have just this inbounds play that they run out of every single timeout where it's like the triple option. No matter what you choose, you're wrong. And it's just it's weird. It's almost kind of like a paradox. It's a simple play, but it's complex at the same time with the amount of it's like a flow chart. It's a bunch of if-thens. And I just think Bill Self's still the coach at Kansas, right? Wait, who's the Kansas coach? Yeah, Bill Self. I think the offense and just kind of the program that he's built there at Kansas is a very strong one. Obviously, I think even if they do not win the Big 12, I think they're a contender for a top 3 seed in terms of I think they'll definitely be a 1, 2, or 3 seed. But like you said, Big 12 is another one of these conferences where I feel like it's kind of a crapshoot. I don't think Houston's going to have the run they did last year. I think they're going to have trouble replacing Sheed. But, who knows? It's college basketball. Like we said, it's the death sentence trying to predict anything. But for my pick, for this conference, my pick is Iowa State. I just think the way they play defense and how dominant how they dominated every single defensive metric last year, I think that'll pay dividends going forward. What about you?
One team that I want to highlight is Baylor. In the fact that I'm very hot and cold on Baylor. Started off the season against Gonzaga, had a very lackluster performance against them, but now has been like kind of brought it back with a solid win against Arkansas. So I feel like that levels out. They have a pretty brutal schedule, going up against St. John's and UConn before conference play. And even when conference play starts, it's gonna like start getting a little bit hairy. Got Iowa State, which we've mentioned before, Arizona later into January. But why I want to highlight Baylor is I think after their Kansas game in February, I just see them being able to make a very solid run at the end of the uh, year. I see it like after that Kansas game, they got Texas Tech. I think that's winnable. UCF winnable. I think they can run the table and sweep Houston. And then after that, like teams like Oklahoma State and TCU, I see Baylor having the case for being able to actually run the table in the Big 12, and I think are able to come away with a very high seeding in the Big 12 after a pretty brutal schedule. That's just one of the teams that I wanted to highlight. Arizona, obviously, is another big contender in the Big 12. I think they have the intangibles and what it takes to really like make it big. Caleb Love, former UNC player, he's pretty much made a very solid name for himself at Arizona, and I think he's gonna have another stellar year at Arizona. And it's just looking at the schedule, like in conference play, I think they have like uh, everything that it takes to have that solid run that's very necessary to make the case for a 1 seed. Um, but the elephant in the room and just basically the empire of the Big 12, Kansas, I don't know if they can be stopped almost. Like they're solid sound and they're UConn in a ACC conference, if that makes sense. Like they have everything going for them, and even the fact that of this brutal schedule that Kansas has, I don't see them being stopped in a substantial way. And those are just my main takeaways of the Big 12. If I had to pick like solid locks for the NCAA tournament, like I did for the ACC, I'd say Kansas is definitely there. Uh, Baylor, I got there too. So 1 and 2. I want to throw Iowa State in there and Arizona. So that's 4. I'm not necessarily so high on Houston right now. So I don't know if they're going to be able to make this the big run that they did last year. So I'm going to be withholding a spot for them. Cincinnati, I'm a little bit iffy on, but I'll throw them a bone. And let's see. I think ASU, Arizona State, might have what it takes to really rebuild in a conference that's heavy in basketball. Arizona State traditionally has a pretty strong basketball culture, and I think they have what it takes to make a run. So I'm going to put 6. Let's throw 7 in there. I think Big 12 has a solid 7 teams that can make it into the tournament.
I agree. I just they like you said, they're a league that's similar to the ACC. They've got a lot of teams, but they're very top heavy. So I do think they do warrant like a 6 or 7 team bid, and that's just them. It's like let me pull up their standings real quick. Where can I pull up the college basketball conference standings? But yeah, I do think they're definitely a excuse me, they're definitely a 7 bid league. I feel like they're one of the few leagues that warrants that. I know last year there was some talk about whether the Big East was a 7-bid league, and then they took, I think, 3. So, but I do think with the teams you have in that conference, you kind of have to. So, but it all depends on how it plays out. So, anything else you want to add for that conference?
No, that just kind of wraps it up for my Big 12 analysis. Are we keeping it to the big conferences? And
We can run through the big conferences. We don't have to go necessarily in depth for all of them. Like we could just like for the SEC. I don't have much to say for the SEC. Like it's pretty much Bama or Arkansas in my opinion. For that one.
yeah. The Big East.
Big East, I do have some things to say. I do have a little bit different of a pick for who I think is going to win that. For the Big East, obviously coming off of a very disappointing year last year, and then a lot of teams feeling like they got snubbed from the NCAA tournament based off of what the metrics were and metrics were used, which I'll get into that at the end about how I feel like kind of the net is kind of a moving goalpost, or at least what the committee values in the net. I feel like changes every year. So without further ado, I guess I'll get into the Big East. Big East, obviously there's teams that are gonna any of these teams could kind of run the table. I mean, it's 11-team conference, but it's brutal in a different way compared to the ACC. ACC, you're playing 2 on your worst week 3 times a week. Big East, you're usually playing on average 1.5 to 2 times a week. So you may or may not. You will always have a game on Saturday or Sunday, but you may or may not have like a Wednesday or a Tuesday game. You will rarely have 3 games a week in the Big East unless it's like this time of year where you're playing, your cupcake schedule or your invitationals. But I think for the Big East, I think UConn will still be a big dog, but in my opinion, I honestly think Creighton may run the table this year. Creighton is returning a lot of starters. Creighton's returning, obviously, Big East Defensive Player of the Year and runner-up for Big East Player of the Year, Ryan Kalkbrenner. He's just such a force to be reckoned with on the inside, defensively and offensively. He's really hard to stop. They're returning Stephen Ashworth, who is 40% from 3. And then they've also got Miller, who's another knockdown 3-point shooter. I know he's a small forward. Creighton doesn't play with a lot of small forwards. They tend to use those as guards for Creighton. They usually play a 4 out, 1 in. Obviously, when you got a guy like Kalkbrenner, you don't necessarily need that many people on the inside to establish a presence. And then obviously they're getting Pop Isaacs from Texas Tech. Pop Isaacs is also a guard, but he's not your stereotypical Creighton guard. Your Creighton guards usually are like knockdown 3-point shooters. Like they're absolute dead eyes from 3. But he does shoot an impressive 40% from the field. He has done pretty well in terms of fitting into that Creighton offense as of late. Let me double check. I do think his 3-point shooting has improved this year in terms of like his numbers compared to, your average Creighton guard. But what I will say that Creighton fans should be excited about is this guy's assists. He had 118 assists last season for the Texas Tech Red Raiders. And I think for a team that likes to move the ball as much as Creighton does, I feel like that his ability to spread the ball around and feed people the basketball in advantageous situations, I just think that's going to play into just the way Creighton plays basketball really well, and I think that's going to spell kind of danger for the rest of the Big East.
Absolutely. And, well, obviously with the Big East always comes, you got to talk about UConn. UConn is returning champs. They got what it takes. Alexander Carbon, Alex Carbon, that is. He's just an absolute. He's top of the team in points per game, assists per game. He's and field goal percentages. He's just an absolute offensive powerhouse, and he's really has a lot of the intangibles that embody just sound UConn basketball. I think he's going to be having a very solid year, and I just look at the first couple games that they've had so far, and like obviously it's against like Sacred Heart in New Hampshire, but just absolute dog walk. They mean business this year. And just looking at their schedule, there's no real team that I see that's going to be a threat to them until they probably play Baylor. But I think UConn takes that. Gonzaga, I like Gonzaga and I respect Gonzaga a lot, but I think just UConn has the better fundamentals and just the overall better. It's the overall better team, especially for tournament play. Granted, this is a regular season game, but I think it's going to have some major seed implications and just displaying what could happen in like maybe a Final Four or an Elite Eight matchup. But I just don't see UConn being slowed down by any of the Big East competition. Granted, I'm not as well versed in the Big East as you are probably, but my solid prediction is UConn, but my heart is telling me, and it's letting me know. Listen, they're the top of the Big East right now. They're the top dogs right now, statistically speaking, in the Big East. If you're just going off wins, and this is a team that is not grown accustomed to wins, but I think they can win in the future. Give me DePaul to make a major run. In the Big East this year. Nah, but in all seriousness, I'm sorry. I like joking a little bit. No disrespect to DePaul, but I don't see them keeping up this momentum that they may be having. I mean, granted, they do have some very solid wins against Southern Indiana, Prairie View, and Mercer. Some powerhouses, and they're going to be playing some powerhouses in the future, such as Valsperio,
Valparaiso.
Valparaiso. I was in Indiana. I know that. Why the fuck did I? I went to school in Indiana for 2 years. I don't know how to pronounce that damn school's name. But nah, I guess obligatory shout out to DePaul, because I don't think I'm going to be able to shout them out much longer for the rest of the season. So I just wanted to give them a quick shout out. Gareth, didn't you want to mention a little bit on Providence going into this season?
Yeah, I did. As you guys probably know, Providence has not looked great in their first 2 out of their 3 games. It's kind of been tough to watch. I will say it's very fixable mistakes. It's nothing to do with like the strategy. You can tell it's there. They're moving the ball well. It's just the team's been kind of careless, if I'm being completely honest. And does it surprise me with kind of the youth that's on this team this year? No. And it's not a carelessness as in they don't care about the sport. It's kind of like, that like when you're a little kid and you first walk into a sports stadium, it's kind of like you kind of zone out for a second. You're like, man, I'm like really here. And I think that's kind of what it's like for some of these players. I mean, obviously, Kim English has reloaded this roster, and our best player has yet to return from his ACL injury that he suffered on January 3rd of this year against Seton Hall. But what I will say, I do think the team dynamic will change when he comes back in, because the dynamic of that Providence team last year completely changed when he went out. I will say that Providence has answered some of their problems that they needed. They have a knockdown 3-point shooter And why am I blanking on his name? He's a recent transfer. Let me look at team stats. Give me a second. Come on, where is it? I'm blanking on his name. It's not Rich Barron. Rich Barron's been good this year, but it's not him. Bensley Joseph, that's who it is. The Miami transfer. I knew he was the Miami guy. Bensley Joseph was a good three-point shooter for Miami last year. He pulled through in Providence's first game when they needed him, knocking down several large threes, and I think was even had north of 20 points. But Providence has only won a few close games. I mean, Central Connecticut was ugly. Tonight was ugly. They blew out Stonehill, Ed Cooley's former team. But, you don't get into March Madness and you don't get knocked out of March Madness for the games you play before, in my opinion, January 1st. Like, obviously, if you lose some big ones, like if Providence dropped one to, say, Central Connecticut State, or they dropped today against against who we played today. If they dropped one today against Hampton. But
it's just a bad omen for what's going to come, really.
Yeah, it's kind of a bad omen, but I do think if we can just bide our time until Bryce Hopkins comes back, and I don't know if many people remember, Devin Carter won Big East Player of the Year. He wasn't supposed to win that. He wasn't the one who was on track to win that statistically. The one who was on track to win that statistically last year was Bryce Hopkins before he tore his ACL. And it was Devin Carter who then came into the picture towards the end of conference play, who kind of came and mopped that up. And I think Bryce Young can kind of carry this, or not Bryce Young, Bryce Hopkins can kind of carry this team. I think with just the experience he brings, as he played for Calipari at Kentucky before he transferred to Providence. He had a really good sophomore season with Providence under Ed Cooley. Had a dominant season last year until the ACL injury on January 3rd. He made Marquette look absolutely silly in that game. I remember you even texted me after that Marquette game last year where you and Therese Wash, you're like, man, these boys can ball. And then the next week, Bryce Hopkins snaps his ACL. And you're like, well, that's not good.
Yeah.
You were like, he was good. That's not good. And I'm like, no, it's not. I was literally like 10 feet from him when it happened. Like, no, it's not good.
Not good.
But in all seriousness, I do think when Bryce Hopkins returns, I think the team dynamic will change a little. They look kind of lost out there, not in terms of not knowing what to do, but it's like their decision-making isn't there. But things like decision-making and sloppiness, I think, are stuff that can be ironed out over the coming weeks. I think it pays good dividends that I don't think Providence really has that much of a challenge coming up lately. I mean, obviously, Big East play is going to be grueling, but I think Providence, their real only test coming up before the new year is BYU, St. John's, and Marquette. Now, those are home games. My hot take for this year, Marquette's going to be lost without Tyler Kolek and Iguodaro. Now, I know I said that, and Marquette looked okay without Kolek last year, but they weren't missing the other people. They lost a lot. And I know people are high on Marquette, but who knows? Same thing with St. John's. St. John's took Seton Hall's best players. They took Kadari Richmond, who I will say, in that game against Providence where Bryce Hopkins snapped his ACL, I honestly thought Kadari Richmond looked like the best guard in the Big East. Yes, in front of Devin Carter. Now, and that's saying something. Devin Carter, obviously, I think after that game where he was kind of forced to come into his own, was the best guard in the Big East. But I definitely think Kadari Richmond has an upside potential. But, hey, St. John's has not looked the part. It's one thing to keep it close with low-tier teams. It's another to lose to them. It is another to lose to them. And that is exactly what St. John's has done. Let me find it. Was it Saturday? No. Who'd they lose to? Or am I thinking of someone else? No, St. John's 2.0, my bad. I was thinking of Seton Hall, but no. I think St. John's I don't think they reloaded enough to take care of those openings. I do think Kadari Richmond will give them that spark, but they're really going to be missing their big on the inside. So who knows with them? So we'll see. But I think Providence will have a good season. I think we may not make the tournament, but I think it's a young roster. Kim English inherited a shit show. When your coach gets poached right after the end of the season, like they did 2 years ago, it's just a shit show. Like, and it's not his fault. I'm not saying like he inherited a Providence team on really short notice, wasn't quite able to get the transfers he needed, and I think that's one of Providence's problems last year was depth. At the end of the day, during down the stretch of the season, the depth was an issue. Devin Carter went down for 2 games, and those were two make or break games for Providence where we played without him against Xavier, lost to Xavier, played without him in a 1-point loss to Butler. Like now Providence has that depth, and I feel like they could be set up for success this season, but they're gonna need to find someone to step up. Bryce Hopkins we saw one player cannot do it all alone by themselves. Now, Carter had Oduro last season, but we don't really have that big on the inside. We have Hopkins. That's it. Jaden Pierre is going to need to step up. He's going to have to be that guy. He's been on the team for 3 years. Last year, I give him a pass. Dude was trying. The shots were just not hitting, and it was comical. And I don't mean this to make fun of him, but it was comical. It wasn't like he was taking bad shots either. It was like the amount of rim outs and like around the worlds, whatever it coming out was hysterical. It would be like Providence would have the momentum in rhythm 3, in and out. Goes in for a layup, in and out. Another wide open in rhythm 3, in and out. So I think he's slated for a big year. I think Providence will make the tournament, but it also wouldn't surprise me if they didn't. I just think there's a lot of new pieces to this team. I think this is definitely a team for the future, but I do think they have the capacity to make the tournament. So,
Yeah.
anything else you want to add?
No, I think I think that sums up the Big East right there.
All right, on to the Big Ten. Big Ten is one of the conferences that I think has kind of fallen the furthest after last season. Honestly, I didn't think they were as good as people thought they were last season. I mean, you had Purdue with Zach Edey, but that was about it. Kind of down the stretch, the Big Ten teams fell apart, but they put a lot of teams in the tournament nonetheless. Obviously, my prediction to win the Big Ten is Purdue. I mean, they've lost a lot, but I just think they're kind of. I'm not saying they're a weak conference. They're still definitely Power 5, but I just say I know they've got ranked teams in that conference, but those teams just aren't the teams they were last year, and so I do think Purdue's the one that reloaded the best out of them, but it's still not great. If you know what I mean. What about you?
Absolutely. I think Purdue is due for a down season. I'm really interested to see how Rutgers performs this season. I feel like they're due for a stronger run, like a very strong run in the NCAA tournament, and I think a lot of people sleep on them, and I'm excited to see what intangibles they can bring. Ohio State is a team that I'm just not necessarily as high on as everyone else is. I just feel like the culture around Ohio State basketball has really declined ever since like the 2010s, and I'll see it when I believe it, which is a little bit hypocritical for me to say like when I'm comparing Rutgers to Ohio State, but I just have that feeling in the air that Rutgers is going to like have what it takes to like actually maybe make a case for the Big Ten later this year. Indiana, of course, is a team that must be mentioned. They're always rocking there in Bloomington. The Hoosiers are a historic team. I feel like they're going to be primed for a big season. Other teams to watch. I think it's going to be interesting to see how Oregon does in this new Big Ten. I'm excited to see them. I'm excited kind of maybe to see USC. I'm not too high on them. I think they're going to kind of be a bottom feeder of the Big Ten. And the other additions to the Big Ten, Washington and UCLA, I'm not high on whatsoever. Maybe I'm a little bit more high on UCLA than years before, just because I feel like maybe this conference might be better suited for them. But other than that, I think that just sums up my opinions on the Big Ten. I'm really going to be keeping my eyes on Rutgers, though.
Definitely. And so now you're going to move to SEC, and then we'll kind of move into just rapid fire.
Yeah, we're doing that. Yeah, I think it's good to just highlight teams in each conference that we're going to be keeping our eyes on. And if it hits, we can say, "Hey, you heard it here first."
And before we go into that, I do think Alabama is going to kind of run back to SEC. I do think there'll be a challenger. I do think Calipari's Arkansas will definitely be one. I mean, he obviously has success at Kentucky, but he was kind of ran out of town there. But I think I don't think Arkansas will win, but I do think they'll definitely give Alabama a run for their money, and especially once Calipari gets his roots set down there, starts implementing his style of play. I do think Arkansas will be a force to be reckoned with in basketball.
Arkansas is definitely going to be the team to watch this year going into SEC. Obviously, with Calipari going in. Other teams to watch, in my opinion, I think Tennessee always is going to be having a case to be made for them. Alabama is the team to beat. They're the top dog in the SEC and have a very solid case to be first seed right now, just as it is with the season. Other teams that I think I'm going to be looking into and just kind of keeping my eye on, Ole Miss is going to be one, and never count Kentucky out. I know Calipari's out. They count, and I think he's going to have. Did my mic go out?
For like a split second.
Fuck. All right. I think we can try to cut that.
Oh yeah, no, I took the time down. I noted the time.
Okay, so I think Calipari with Arkansas is going to be a team that is definitely one that we need to keep an eye on, as you mentioned. I'm very high on them, and I think once Calipari has his system set, they're going to be a power to really be reckoned with in the SEC. Alabama, of course, is the top dog, and I think they're going to be the team to beat going into this year. They have a very strong case to be a first seed just right off the gate right now, just preseason first seed. And I haven't seen any weaknesses in their game so far that I can really point out. So they're obviously the team to beat. Tennessee, of course, is another team that has a very strong returning starters. And I think they're going to be in there making a solid run. I'm keeping my eye on them. Auburn and Kentucky, teams you definitely can't count out. Kentucky without Calipari is going to be interesting to see. So far, they've been pretty strong. I like their win against Duke. And I definitely see them making a strong run in the SEC that is going to be very notable to look out for. So those are just kind of the teams that I'm looking at right now.
Definitely. And from here on out, Aiden and I are just kind of jump into almost like a rapid fire of who we think is going to win the remaining, 26 conferences. So and if we have something to say, we'll stop and slow down for a second. But we really don't have much to say for a lot of these. Some of them we do, others we don't. So, and you just want to get started alphabetically.
Yeah, so starting off with the ASUN, I think Eastern Kentucky and Northern Alabama are probably the strongest teams. North Florida also is pretty strong. They've been showing some pretty solid wins so far in the season. I just wanted to highlight they got a solid win against South Carolina, got a solid win against the Georgia Tech team. Lost against Georgia, but
Keep an eye on Northern Florida for making a run in the ASUN, and obviously, like just with Eastern Kentucky, they're kind of a perennial power of the ASUN that uh, is always worth keeping an eye on.
I definitely agree. I do think North Florida will be a team to keep an eye on, particularly with the teams they've spoiled recently. I do think one team that could have a chance to run away with the ASUN is Lipscomb. They're returning a lot of their scores. They look good. They've kind of been a power. They're not a perennial power like Eastern Kentucky, but they're more of a recent power, I feel like, in the ASUN, where we've seen Lipscomb run the table in the last, not necessarily the last few years, but like last decade or so, we've seen Lipscomb they've been kind of the emerging champion. They've been, kind of not a mainstay, but, you're not surprised when you see Lipscomb on the bracket. It every 2 or 3 years you see Lipscomb out there. So I think they're going to be my pick. They've got a mature squad. So I've them, and I'd say obviously, Eastern Kentucky and North Florida would be my teams to kind of watch out for in this tournament, or not in this tournament, in this league.
Going into the American East Conference, two big teams that I'm looking into. Vermont, I know you've had some stuff to say about them. I'm going to give that to you, but UMass Lowell, I think, has had a pretty solid start so far in the season. I think they might be falling off. Like they got Gonzaga next, and on Friday, and I think that's going to be a pretty tough game for them. And I don't see them coming out with that, but I think it's just I think it's very notable that they started off the season like 2-0, which is always is good, especially when you're considering these smaller conferences, since they tend to play bigger teams. They started off with two smaller teams, so that's kind of like take it or leave it. But any start with 2-0 is a good start, especially with these smaller teams. So I'm keeping my eyes on UMass, but I'm also really keeping my eyes on Vermont, which I know you wanted to highlight.
Yeah, definitely. When it comes to the America East, you really kind of have to. I think this team. I know when I said this about Lipscomb, but I think this team's definitely going to run away with it. UVM is returning 7 of their 9 top scorers, 4 of which are starters. So there was no need for a reloading. Like they are rearing and ready to go, and I think they're going to make another run in the America East Conference, and I think they're going to definitely be the auto bid out of there. In terms of success, I don't think they're going to have. I don't think they're going to go too terribly far in the tournament. I mean, I will say those guys have another added year of experience, but I mean, they kind of hung around with Duke, and I think with some added experience, and if they have a bit more success this season, they'll have a little bit of a higher seed. They could have a chance to make some noise, but I really don't see them getting past the first round. But hey, who knows? I'm not trying to knock Vermont. They were able to keep guys out of the portal. They were able to keep their best players from being poached, and there's something to be said about that in this modern day and age of NIL. So who knows? Vermont could be playing spoiler like we saw with Oakland over Kentucky, with NIL, these more, teams that have been able to kind of hold on to their players. You've got seniors playing against, they're playing against Kentucky or Kansas, but they're playing against, a team that's freshmen and sophomores. Like Duke's another example of this. Like at some point, the maturity level will take over in those stressful moments. And I do think Vermont could be a spoiler down the stretch in the NCAA tournament after they've won the American East. But another team I'd like to look out for in the American East is Marist. They've got more mature squad. They've not necessarily all seniors, but their squad's more mature. They've got a few key transfers, and I think Marist may not win the America East, but they could give UVM a challenge for the America East Conference.
Yeah, moving on to the American Athletic Conference, there are 3 teams that I kind of wanted to highlight. Memphis is always the team that you need to look out for on the preseason, always bringing in a strong roster. Now, whether they are able to utilize their roster and utilize depth is something to be seen. But they're always a team you just always need to look out for, especially early on in the season, able to pull away against a strong UNLV team, which I'm going to be highlighting when we talk about the Mountain West Conference. I think that's a good win, and also a win against Missouri. Maybe this is going to be the year that we see a very Memphis make a strong run in the tournament, and I'm excited to see the future for them. Other teams in the AAC that I wanted to highlight, Wichita State. You should never really count them out. They're one of those teams that always comes around every 4 years or so. They have a lot of seniors. I think they have what it takes to really run the table in the American. And then my surprise pick, I'm going to have to go with ECU. They're always able to make strong players and utilize the Carolina regions to really bring some solid talent in. And I'm keeping my eye on ECU.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there on Wichita State. Like you noted, Aiden and I were talking beforehand. Wichita State's one of those teams that I don't know if I coined this term, but this is a term that came to mind when I was on a radio show last year. Is I called them like a cicada team. Like Aiden said, they usually come around every 4 or so years and they've got a strong roster. This year, their roster is majority senior and fifth years. So they may not win their conference, but I do think they're slated for a tournament appearance. I do think they are slated for a tournament appearance. And obviously, like you said, Memphis, another team out there. Not necessarily a perennial power, but they are the more recent power in the American Conference basketball. Not really much to say about them, but I do think we'll see both of those teams in March. I definitely think we'll see Wichita State. Now, whether they win, like I said, whether they win the American, I don't know. But I do think Wichita State could be slated for a good season this year and possibly a tournament appearance.
Absolutely. Going into the A10, A10 is a very strong conference that a lot of people look over, but just some strong teams that I wanted to bring up. Dayton, always making a case. Always like they're always there. I think they're always
Perennial power.
Yeah, perennial power of the A10. Loyola Chicago, another perennial power of the A10 as of late. Always trying to make a case in the NCAA tournament. Never keep your eye off of them. They're always strong, and always you always got to keep your eye on them. VCU, just another perennial power in the A10 that you always got to look out for and keep an eye on. I'm also going to bring up Rhode Island. I think I just got a feeling about them so far. Had a strong win against Holy Cross, which I think is going to go a long way. I think they have a good shot against Charleston going into later, like the next couple games that they have on their slate. I think it's their first real test is going to be up against Providence, and that's when I'm going to really be able to make an inference on it if they're going to be able to be a tournament caliber team. And I just keep your eye on URI. I think that's just a team that needs to be on everyone's watch list so far. And I think that kind of sums it up for the A10 for me.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with you for the A10. Definitely Dayton and Loyola Chicago. One team I'd like to throw in there is St. Joe's. They're coming off of a win over Villanova recently. And I know Villanova's kind of ass this season. Like, they're not what, like, yes, they still have Eric Dixon, who's a phenomenal basketball player, and I do think will be an NBA draft pick, possibly a lottery draft pick, although that might be kind of a hot take. But they're coming off of a win over Villanova, who was a team last year who people thought should have made the tournament. I'm going to go into that later once we finish our conference predictions because I have a bone to pick with the net. But like you said, perennial power. URI, I always feel like their telltale game for each year is the Providence game of how the season's going to go. They haven't beat Providence since 2019, 2020. Although that season, That Providence team got off to a really slow start, but then they turned it on, swept a ranked Villanova, swept a ranked Creighton, split with a ranked Marquette, beat a ranked UConn. So who knows? And URI was doing good that season. That URI team, you may ask, who were they coached by? Current UConn coach Dan Hurley. So hopefully, not hopefully, I hate URI, being a Providence fan, but fuck them. But I do think that Providence game, that's kind of not like a season setter, but that can be kind of a momentum swing for them if they're able to pull that out. That, like you said, can be a telltale sign whether they are ready to hang in the A10. I know they aren't predicted to finish that high, but A10, like you do have your perennial powers, but I feel like college basketball can be a crapshoot. And, teams get hot, teams go cold, teams can't, for some reason, someone gets hurt. Who knows? I think that'll do it for me from the A10, but I do think those about 4 or 5 teams that I'd say watch from the A10.
Yeah, moving into the Big Sky Conference, I don't see any real teams here that I think can make a big run, but obviously I think Montana, they've been the power of the Big Sky for a good while now, so I'm going with Montana on this one. I think you roughly have the same opinion.
I disagree. I'm gonna roll with my boy Parker Keller and
Shout
the
out, Parker.
Montana State. And Montana State. Shout out Parker. Montana State. I think, him cooking up in the chemistry lab is going to be doing some good things for him. He's going to be getting those players on them PEDs.
Hell yeah.
That's off the record. That's not what he's actually studying. So don't get him in trouble, but he's not actually doing that. He's student teaching. But, shout out Parker. Fuck it. Give me Montana State in the Big Sky. Moving on. What's up next? Is Big South,
Big South
next?
High Point. They got the most returning starters. Everybody's hopping on the High Point train, and I am too. Real case to be made that they can be the one undefeated team going into the tournament. I'm not gonna go against the grain on this one. I'm just going High Point.
I'm going to say High Point as well, but I will give a second team to watch that could play. Spoiler to that, give me Winthrop. In the past, they've been good. I know since they lost NC State legend DJ Burns, they've been kind of struggling. But, who knows? They're slated to finish second in the Big South this year, so they could play spoiler. So who knows? That'll do it for me from the Big South. Up next, what's Big West?
Big West. Hawaii's cool. I'm going. I just off vibes. I'm going Hawaii, but if we're going serious talk here, UC Irvine is pretty much the power of the Big West, and I'm not. I got them.
I'm gonna go with their rival. Give me the UC Santa Barbara Gauchos. Slated to finish second in the conference, similar to the last conference situation, but slated to finish second to UIC. But, who knows? These college basketball conferences, Big West could be a 2-bid league. Sometimes it is. I definitely think with not how strong it is, but with how competitive this league is, it sometimes does get 2 bids, but we will see coming out of there. Up next, we got the Colonial.
Well, I just wanted to say about UC Irvine. I'm really high on them. Mainly just the fact I saw them have a really solid win against a pretty decent Northern Iowa team. I think they have what it takes to make a run in this conference. Bennett Lechin, he's scoring. He's probably the team's top scorer. He's been really solid field goal percentage. And then I'm going to butcher this. Ufere Uja Dunga Alele, averaging the most assists in the for his team. He's been able to pass the ball around and really create space for these 3-point shots that I think are going to go a long way in helping UCI make a run. in the conference. But after that, going into the Colonial Conference, Gareth, what are your thoughts? I think I'm just going Charleston, but I got to give a shout out to UNC Wilmington. They're really great at playing spoilers. They play the big teams really close. I got to go with either Charleston or UNCW just because I think they usually have what it takes to hang with the big teams.
All right, I've got two. One's based off of logic and a very recent performance against Providence, and one's based on vibes. I'm going to go logic first. First, I'm going to go with Hampton. They played Providence really close. They were able to knock down some key shots, able to force a lot of turnovers against a Providence team that historically doesn't turn the ball over a lot, although this season that hasn't been the case. But like I said, a lot of kinks to iron out for Providence, but I do think those will get ironed out. But hey, you played Providence close in the dunk. Sorry, I'm not going to call it the AMP. Shut the fuck up if you want to call it the AMP. So we're not calling it that on here. We're calling it what it actually is. So if you can play Providence close in the AMP, obviously you've got a lot of talent. You've got a lot very good game plan. I think Hampton could be a good team and kind of they could claim the Colonial Athletic. Now I will say off of vibes, I'm just gonna say fuck it and go William and Mary. Just with how much my sister says she hates the athletes there and they ride around on their little dumb scooters. But scooters sound cool. So fuck it. Give me William and Mary.
Nice. Going into Conference USA, I didn't know really what team to look out for, but then I saw Liberty pull out an absolute brave and daring win against one of the strongest teams I've ever seen, Carolina Christian University. The Bruins. If you've been on TikTok, this is probably one of the biggest powers that you can deal with when it comes to basketball in the Carolinas. I think the fact that Liberty was able to get such a daring and cardiac win. It was close all the way through, 81-45. Amazing game on Liberty's part. I don't see how they could lose after playing such a team, and I see them running the table in Conference USA with the power of God on their side. The two Christian universities duked it out, and God picked his favorite, so I'm not going against God on this one.
The 25 turnovers Liberty forced that game.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
defensive dominance right there. 25 turnovers. I don't think I've ever seen north of 20. 25 turnovers is crazy.
Very daring and very close win.
Indeed. I agree. I think Liberty will be a force to be reckoned with in Conference USA. But I think Conference USA, you always got to warrant a mission from the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers. And Big Red, the Red Blob.
Hell
Don't
yeah.
know what the fuck a Hilltopper is, but, go Big Red. Moving on to the favorite conference of Aiden and I.
The Horizon League.
With historically some of the worst teams in college basketball. But, fuck it. I think this team's going to have the turnaround of the century.
Yes.
To win the Horizon League, give me the Indiana, Purdue University of Indiana, or as we like to call, Ooey Pooey. Fuck it. Give me them to win the Horizon League.
I'm sorry, Gareth. I'm going to have to go against you on this one. Though Ooey Pooey is a solid team, I'm going to have to go with an even stronger team. A team that is going to overcome so much adversity. 0 wins last season. Undefeated this season so far. Actually, no, I lied. They're 2-1. But if they lose again, you take 2 L's, you make that a W. They're undefeated again. So give me the Detroit Mercy. Oh, the Detroit Mercy. You got the Detroit Mercy. They're the Titans. They won against Clary U. They don't even have their logo on ESPN, and they won against Niagara. They lost against Loyola, but you know what? I think they're gonna have one hell of a run for the ages, if you will. Give me the Detroit Mercy. The Horizon League is going to be shivering in their timbers at the thought, regretting the day they added the Detroit Mercy Titans to their league.
All right. Up next, we have got the Ivy League. I think you and I have pretty similar picks on this, but I'm just going to go with Princeton. Princeton and Yale, those are the teams that, they're kind of been the two perennial powers as of late in the Ivy League. I know Harvard used to be up there, but Harvard's kind of fallen off since my cousin hasn't played for him in a while. Not saying there's a coincidence there at all. I'm not – there's no correlation there at all. But, I think Princeton, great showing last year. I think they got a great coach. They've reloaded the roster. And like I said, it's always fun watching these future NBA players tax guys knock down threes in their face. I just think that's fun to watch. But, I'm going to go with Princeton and Yale teams to watch. They're always solid teams.
I'm going to go with Princeton and Columbia. Columbia's had a very solid start so far. Beat a Villanova team that everyone's beating up on right now. So they didn't lose to them, so I can't discredit them for that. But I think Columbia is gonna, with their strong start, I think they're gonna also be making a pretty solid run. But if I had to put my money on any team, I'm gonna probably be going with Princeton just because they have that perennial power status. But I'm keeping my eye on Columbia.
Up next, we've got the Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference. And for the winner of this, I'm going with my neighbors down Route 128. Give me fucking Merrimack from down the street from me. They're winning the MAAC. I know they're not favored to win. They're favored second. But give me Merrimack. Another team I'd say to look out for who has received some first place votes in terms of the preseason polls, the Marist Red Foxes. Not a team we've heard a lot about from basketball-wise in the last couple decades, but, this could be Marist season, and we've seen crazier things happen. So who knows? I'd say so. Marist and Merrimack are my teams to watch in the MAAC.
I'll go with Merrimack. I have no real strong opinions about the MAAC, but Merrimack. What can I say about Merrimack that hasn't been said about Merrimack?
It's in a beautiful city. Not really.
City. They beat Vermont. They beat Vermont. So that's their only game so far in the season. So undefeated, but I can't.
I caught fish in the Merrimack River once. I caught a few mackerel. That's about it.
Yeah,
they're up the
very
street
solid.
from me.
Very solid lineup for Merrimack. So much so that I don't want to overindulge, just glazing Merrimack more than they deserve. So I'm gonna let their game speak for themselves. But let's get into some action, baby. Let's get into some action.
Aiden and I's favorite time of year. Different sport though, but still action.
Oh my gosh. Love the action. I think going in, I liked Toledo's win against Marshall, and I see a pretty easy schedule until they actually run a gauntlet and have to face Houston and Purdue on back-to-back games. That's going to be brutal. But other than that, if they're able to come out with a winning record after basically 2 guaranteed losses, I think I see them being able to make a run in the MAC. And so for that, I got the Toledo Rockets for the MAC.
For the MAC, I also Toledo is one of the teams I highlighted. The other team, and I know this that people could say this is a sellout pick because this is what everyone else is picking for the MAC. But I just think with the transfers that Ohio's gotten, and I know we've said this about other teams, but Ohio, they've retained some key starters. They've reloaded the roster where they needed to, and I've got Ohio winning the MAC. I not much else I can say, but
Yeah, I
what's up
mean,
next?
Ohio's transfers is another thing that I also noted, but yeah, I think it's just between like Ohio, like it's Ohio's real league to lose at this point, in my opinion. But we'll see how it goes. So far, like I haven't been really impressed with their start, but still early in the season. It's anybody's league, so we'll see how it goes. Going into the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference, the Mecca, I mean, the perennial power for a while was Howard, so I always like keeping my eye on them. But Norfolk State started off with a pretty solid 3-1 start, so I think keeping our eyes on them is definitely going to be advantageous. And nothing more I could say about that.
My pick from that conference is just Norfolk State based on vibes. I'm feeling it. They were slated to finish like second or third, but vibes.
Yeah.
Up next, we got the Missouri Valley Conference. For them, they're kind of just I forget who all is in that conference. I know there's University of Northern Iowa. I know they've played spoilers sometimes. The amount of times on Thanksgiving I've watched NC State lose to UNI in the fucking Maui Invitational. Too many to count. Only for us to somehow go on and then beat Duke the next week. So that makes no sense. But who knows? I mean, we'll see.
Drake is also basically the perennial
Drake.
power. Yeah, Drake's the perennial power of the Missouri Valley. So I got pretty much UNI and Drake. Those are the teams that I'm watching, and I'm keeping an eye on for this season.
I know Bradley, the Braves. They're kind of like the trendy team right now in that conference. But honestly, I'm not feeling the vibes. Yeah, they're 2-1, but that I'm just not really feeling them. If you know what I mean. Like I'm not catching the vibe from Bradley.
Me neither.
Up next,
neither.
We've got the what is it?
Mountain West Conference.
Fuck them. Fuck the Mountain West.
What's your beef against the Mountain West?
Let's hop in a time machine and go back to March. 6 teams. 6 teams.
Yeah, that's a little rough. But
6 teams. Let's see when they all lost. We've got our first team from the Mountain West, San Diego State. They lost. Okay, I'll give it to them. They lost in the Sweet 16. I'll give them that. Up next, we have Nevada, first round. Next team, Colorado State, first round. Well, technically second round for them, but Up next, we've got, where are they? Utah State, second round, loses by 50. Keep going. Colorado State loses by 12, second round. Where is it? Boise State loses first round. Like, I'm no mathematologist, but if you're a 6-bid league, your average team shouldn't be going out in the fucking first round, let alone the 2 of them going out in the first 4. Like, San Diego State, I'll give them that. They made it to the Sweet 16. They beat some tough teams. But, like, let's be real. That was not a 6-bid league.
Yeah. But anyway, I'm going to give 6 teams in the Mountain West Conference that I'm looking after right now to make the tournament. But in all seriousness, UNLV is a historically strong team in basketball. I'm always keeping my eye on them. San Diego State, likewise. Um, I like their run that they had last year. I think they might be able to recreate a bid this year. And New Mexico, I'm always looking after them. I want to see them in the pit, just doing what they do. Had a strong win against UCLA, and really, I think they have what it takes to probably make a very strong run this season. So I'm keeping my eye on the Lobos.
For me, definitely, it's always the Lobos, like, the perennial power of the pit. Another team that I'm looking out for is Boise State. I know a lot of analysts are slating them to have a good year. I know some people are even having them as their favorite to win. I'm not getting that kind of vibe, but I do think they could make a run. They're my team to watch for this conference. They may not win the regular season, but I do think with how kind of fun and frisky that blue turf is, they could make a run in the conference tournament. So that's
It's basketball.
It's basketball. They should make that basketball floor blue. I'm just saying, if Oregon can do whatever that fucking horrendous thing is with their floor, if Oregon can make that abomination, Boise State can play on a blue gym floor. Boise State can play on a blue floor.
Yeah. Moving on, we got the Northeast Conference. I think maybe teams that I think should you look out for. I don't think Fairleigh Dickinson's going to be recreating any magic anytime soon. I got Central Connecticut. They've had a pretty solid start to their season, and I think they're going to be. I think they're going to be a pretty strong team. So I got Central Connecticut.
Yeah, I do too, for the exact same reason. That strong start, like I said, it takes a lot to push Providence to the edge in the dunk, especially as a non-Big East team, and you did that. You forced Providence to have to resort to a lot of really tough shots that, if you're a Central Connecticut fan, that unfortunately Providence did end up knocking down, but you essentially forced Providence into a corner, and they had to make a lot of tough shots that they wouldn't normally make. So, like I said, Central Connecticut, strong start. I know they got the L against Providence this past weekend, but hey, they're a strong team and they don't play in the Big East, so all good. Now, the Ohio Valley Conference, everyone's favorite. For me, I'm going Little Rock just off vibes.
I'm going
honestly. UT Martin, that's fair. Probably the only two teams Aiden and I could point out on a map.
Yeah. Well, no, there's Tennessee Tech. We could probably.
Oh, true.
But just off vibes for me, UT Martin's always like that sneaky team that's always able to find a way into the tournament. So I don't see it this season being any different. I got the Skyhawks making a run, and I think they're gonna have what it takes to take the Ohio Valley.
Definitely. Up next, we've got the good old Patriot League. I know this team wasn't favored to win the Patriot League, but they are getting some first place votes. I think this could be American's year. American, they're usually kind of the laughing stock of this conference, but they've put together a solid roster. They've got some maturity, and I think that not a run in the tournament, but I think they could win the Patriot League, possibly could find themselves with an automatic bid to the tournament. Do I think they'll win any games? No, but I do think once they get there, but I think they could be poised to make a little bit of noise in the Patriot Conference.
Yeah, give me Bucknell. I think they've got a good amount of returning starters. They lost to Kentucky, but not granted it was by 30 points, but able to put 72 on Kentucky is an achievement in of itself. And I think if they're able to keep their offensive hot like they were against Delaware and Southern Indiana, I think they have a case to make a run in the Patriot League.
Yes. Up next, the SoCon. For me, this was always one team. After how they played in this past March Madness, and I know this team got bounced in the first round, but this team hung with the team that they, in theory, should have been blown to smithereens by. I've got the Samford Bulldogs. They've reloaded their roster, and I know it's the trendy pick, but like they've got a lot going for them right now. Retain the players they needed to retain, reload the roster they need to reload. I think they're rearing and ready to go. I think we'll see Samford again this year in March Madness and possibly make some noise.
Yeah, give me Samford. I'm also keeping my eye on Furman. They're always in there playing spoiler to teams. I think they have a pretty solid enough roster with enough returning starters to really make a run. And maybe I want to keep my eye on VMI. They tend to play some pretty disciplined ball, and I think they might have a case. I'm just not as high on VMI as I am Samford, though. So my two main picks are Samford or VMI.
Up next, we've got the Southland Conference.
McNeese.
Yeah, much similar. Yeah, McNeese. Much similar to my last pick. This was a team that, let me look back at it. I want to see where they went. They were on the left side of the bracket. No, they were on the right. My bad. My B. McNeese State. I honestly had them as a pick to beat Gonzaga. They kind of hung around with Gonzaga for a little bit, but unfortunately Gonzaga pulled away and won by 21. McNeese, they kind of run this conference every year, so I think it's just a easy pick. Up next, we've got the SWAC Conference. I'm going with the good old knockoff Microsoft Paint Georgia logo. That is Grambling State. The Georgia logo, if you just painted it yellow.
Isn't that the Packers logo?
Packers logo, if you put black on it. Whatever you want to call it. Yellow Georgia logo or black Packers logo without black. Whatever you're going to call it, I'm going on vibes. Give me Grambling State.
Give me Mississippi Valley State.
Oh, yes. MVSU.
Only had like 2 wins last season. They got 1 win right now. I'm sensing a turnaround. There. I'm sensing a turnaround right now. Give me the Delta Devils.
As Bon Jovi says, we're halfway there.
They're halfway there.
All right. Up next, we've got the Summit League, and I think you and I have the same pick for this.
Well, they got powerhouses like Oral Roberts. They got Omaha. But I'm probably going to go with South Dakota State. But I want to give a shout out to Kansas City.
The Roos.
The Roos.
You know what? Give me, for that conference, for the Summer League, give me the Kansas City University Kangaroos. They are my pick to win the Summit League.
Damn right.
The Dakotas, they get enough attention in Summit League football. So.
Yeah. I mean, I'm keeping my eye on the South Dakota schools, though. South Dakota State, South Dakota. I think those teams have the strongest case, which leads us into the Sun Belt. I believe the trendy. I got a good amount of teams that I wanted to highlight from here. Troy, they've had a pretty solid start. JMU, I really like the vibes. This team kind of had a solid win against the Ohio team that we were pretty high on, and I see them being able to make a solid run in the Sun Belt Conference. So JMU is mainly my pick, but Troy's strong start can't be undermined, and those are my main 2 schools.
My 2 schools are one's based off of vibes and one's based off of marketing strategy. I'm going to start with the first one based off of marketing strategy. Coastal Carolina. Coastal Carolina's booster club, or not booster club, athletic department has said that with the men's and women's basketball teams have a collective win number of 35. One team could be 34 and 1, the other one could be 1-34, and they still get it. As long as their win total adds up to 35, they are refunding all season ticket holders. So I feel like that's just enough incentive to get people out to the games, and I feel like their home atmosphere could be something that carries them over the edge. Now, the vibes. This team is not picked to finish anywhere near the top of the Fun Belt. And yes, I said Fun Belt. This is a team that Aiden and I have had a lot of fun with on a lot of these NCAA football video games. Give me the Southern Miss Golden Eagles. Good old smash and dash, even though that's not even a basketball thing. That's the fictional offense Aiden and Gareth have made on multiple NCAA games.
Indeed.
That Georgia Tech has actually brought to the realm of reality. So, yes, moving into the WCC, which is probably the last conference I can really comment on. I'm going to let you start with this one.
Gonzaga. But if I had to pick second place, it's going to be a tie between St. Mary's, San Francisco. Sometimes Pepperdine is able to squeak in there. And I'm just going to watch them just because, the addition. But Oregon State and Washington State, I don't think they're predicted to be top of the conference, but I think they add a little extra depth to conference that's sometimes pretty slept on just because it's usually just known as Gonzaga's conference. But those are the teams I'm looking at.
This team that I'm choosing for this, obviously familial, family friend kind of obligation, but they do have a lot going for them. This team's returning 5 out of 6 starters, and they're getting a transfer. Their top scorer from 2 years ago transferred away to Arkansas State, and Carlos Stewart is now transferring back to the Santa Clara Broncos, who are my pick to win the WCC this year. Like I said, returning 5 of 6, and they're bringing back their top scorer from 2 years ago. I think they are slated for a strong season. They definitely could win the WCC, but I think with how strong it is this year, I think this could be a 2-bid league, possibly 3. I know it's been 2 bids in the past when St. Mary's has been strong, but if Santa Clara is able to upend at least St. Mary's and possibly vie for that second spot and keep it close to Gonzaga, we could be seeing 2, possibly 3 bids out of the WCC this year. And to round it all out, we've got the WAC.
Going off of just home court advantage, I want to go with Grand Canyon on this one. They usually have a pretty strong home presence. I think they're always able to at least make a run for the Western Athletic Conference. I'm looking into I'm watching them this season, and also Abilene Christian. They tend to put together some pretty solid teams, and I'm really excited to see what they might have to offer this year. Those are just the 2 teams that I'm looking at.
Definitely for me, I'm definitely gonna go with Grand Canyon. One thing that was talked about last year about people were wondering if they're such a little known university, how do their fans travel? They're a big online university, so they've kind of got fans all over, which is why at all their tournament games this year, it kind of seemed like, God, there's an ungodly amount of Grand Canyon University fans here. But when you're an online university where you have students where almost half your classes are asynchronous online, and some of these NCAA tournament tickets, particularly if you buy them in bundles, are pretty cheap. So you got fans all over. You can pretty much have home court advantage wherever you want. So that's going to round out our conference picks. Aiden and I do have some tidbits we'd like to add towards the end of here. The first thing being, obviously, with the collapse of the Pac-12, Aiden and I have kind of hinted at this throughout. The 1 extra at-large bid. And some of you at home saying, what the fuck does it matter? That's 1 extra bid. There are a lot of teams last year that would have killed for that extra bid. And this is a twofold part rant. So, if we look at last year, based off the metrics and what the committee said, the team that would have gotten this one extra at-large bid would have been the Seton Hall Pirates. Very deserving team, several quad one wins. Just they were a strong team all around. Obviously, they beat Providence at home. I think Seton Hall may have been the only team to get UConn in conference play last year. But this is going to lead in my rant about the net and the selection process for the NCAA tournament. I'm going to keep it short because this is a long episode, but we've got to find another way to evaluate teams besides the net. I realize no system is perfect, but the net overly values offensive efficiency, which is skewed towards blowout wins, and offensive efficiency does not really take into account the other team's strength or strength of schedule. Now, the net does have an option where you can view it adjusted for strength of schedule, but in my understanding last year, that's not what they used. So, moving on. A lot of people have said now to get into the NCAA tournament, you need to have a net ranking of at least 60. But let me tell you why this is broken. This team was 18-15. And they had how many quad one wins? They had only 4 quad one. They were 4-11 in quad one. And were 3-3 against quad 3. What do you think this team was given in the net? And they were 18-15.
I don't know. I know this is a setup.
They were ranked 40th. And there was buzz on Twitter that this team was robbed at 18-15. It's Villanova from last year.
Shit. Yeah.
Now, we'll move on to another team that the net severely underranked last season. I can't remember if they made March Madness, but they are definitely a team that was worthy of making it. So, did they make it? Let me check. I think they did make it last year, but control. This team did make it, but did get bounced in the first round. But let me tell you how broken the net is. This team, that we're going to compare this team to Villanova, who is at 40. This team is 26-7.
Mm-hmm.
They have 6 quad one wins.
Mm-hmm.
And had a overall pretty strong winning record in their conference. They went 9-0 against quad 4, 6-2 against quad 3, an impressive 5-0 against quad 2. This team was 51st in the net. It makes no sense. That's South Carolina. Now, this one's a little more personal and pisses me the fuck off. This team was 21-3. 6 quad 1 wins, undefeated in quad 2, undefeated in quad 3. Misses the tournament. Ranked 58th in the net, Providence.
Yeah, I knew you were going to set this one up.
Now, this one's even arguably the worst of them all. This team is 24th in the net at 19-14. A lot of people thought they shouldn't have made the tournament. And this team, I will say, got lucky in the first round of the tournament before they got shithoused. I think you know who this team is, Aiden, because you guys played them.
Hang on,
They were 19-14 and were 24th in the net.
God, I need to remember.
They had 3 quad 1 wins and were 24th in the net. Michigan State.
Oh, yeah.
24th in the net with 3 quad 1 wins. What the fuck? So you get my point, and why are we basing who makes the tournament based off where they fall in the net? And I get the counter argument is just win your conference. Some of these conferences are 17 teams deep. Do they know how unlikely that is? And this isn't like the Ivy League. The Ivy League, for those who don't know, is one of the few conferences that does not have a conference tournament. Oh, wait, no, sorry. They have a conference tournament now, but only 4 teams make it out of the 8 Ivy League.
Yeah.
But really, the net, I'm okay with having a metric for ranking teams to help them decide and make tough decisions to get teams into March Madness. And I realize no system's going to be perfect, but we've got to refine the net. Like, adjust the offensive efficiency. Like, take things into account. A team that's 3-9, and yes, 3 quad 1 wins is good, but 3-9 in quad 1, and they're ranked the 24th best team in the nation, ahead of teams that, yes, Providence was 6-9 in quad 1, but that's still 6 wins. That's still double the amount of quad 1 wins, and they are more than triple the way down the net rankings than Michigan State. Villanova had like 2 quad 1 wins, and they're at 40. I get it's not perfect. Nothing's going to be perfect. Like, even the college football playoff rankings that Aiden and I sometimes have no issues with, there are flaws.
I do. I have issues this week.
Oh, I do too. But we'll get to that tomorrow night. We have issues.
Spoiler. Why the hell is Miami over SMU? I'm sorry.
I thought we valued tiebreakers.
I mean, like they haven't played yet, but like I'm sorry. In the playoff, I think SMU should have this bye right now.
Definitely. But like I'm saying, there's gonna be flaws. Like, such is the nature when you are trying to make a playoff to find the best teams. Someone's gonna get left. You're gonna step on toes. Someone's gonna get left out. Now, another team that honestly doesn't feel like they should have been left out. I honestly don't know how to feel about them. This team was 43rd in the net. Their quad 1 wins were not there. But based on the teams that made the tournament, one could make the argument that this team should have made it. I don't know how you would feel about letting this team into the NCAA tournament, but this team certainly felt like they deserved to be there, and their fans made it known. Wake Forest, 2 quad 1 wins. They went 7-4 against quad 2, 5-1 against quad 3, and then the necessary sweep of quad 4. But I would not have said take a team like that. But looking at the teams that were taken in the tournament last year, I do think Wake Forest fans have a right to be angry, if you know what I'm saying.
Definitely.
But no, I think that'll do it for us. That's enough of ranting about the net. Do you have anything else to say?
Nah.
We'll probably obviously we're not going to do an episode this long on just solely college basketball, but we're going to start incorporating more college basketball into the show as it ramps up. Maybe not as much in the preseason. No, I don't want to call it preseason, but these out-of-conference games. I mean, if there's a big out-of-conference game like Carolina had the other night, we'll highlight it. Or like when NC State plays Texas or Purdue, like the grudge match against Purdue, we'll highlight it. But once conference play starts, we'll start getting into more like as college football winds down and we start getting into the teeth of basketball conference play, we'll go more in depth. So thank you for listening in to our long college basketball preview, but this is a sport Aiden and I are very passionate about. In terms of where it is with college football, we don't know, but it's still a sport we religiously will follow from about now until April. So thank you guys for listening in, and we will see you tomorrow night for our regular airing of our show.
Damn right. We're doing a doubleheader this week.